They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And holy smokes, this, all I can tell you is that there are people walking around this radio station, our podcast studio. Everybody looks a little glazed over because, Katie, I used to say the news cycle is like a ceiling fan, but I have actually revised that. I was wrong. It is actually like a fire hose these days.
Wow, I know. And just when you think things are going to calm down, something new hits and it is all drama all the time.
You know, it feels like we were on a cruise together, but it feels like 14 years ago, not just like 3 weeks ago. And as we got on that Patriots Alaska cruise, the big story, of course, was the debate and the failed attempt at the debate by Joe Biden. And now we've had him forced out of office. He said he's no longer going to be running for president. That came this last Sunday. We've had an assassination attempt against President Trump. So let's actually start there because there has been a lack of answers on just what happened, what the failures were, and who's going to take responsibility to fix this. And under a lot of scrutiny and under a lot of pressure, the director of the Secret Service just resigned this week. Kimberly Cheadle is out. According to reports, she was a friend of Jill Biden. She used to serve actually on the Secret Service during when the Bidens were, when they were vice president and second lady. She went to work and did security over at Pepsi, and now she's back. And again, with that strong connection to Jill Biden, apparently she thought that she was going to be able to just kind of skate on this. She did. She sat for a House panel. She was compelled to testify. She was subpoenaed and showed up before the House Oversight Committee, where both Democrats and Republicans were unhappy with the lack of answers. I mean, you want to talk about Stonewall Jackson? She was the Stonewall Queen. I mean, she didn't answer anything, Katie.
Well, you know, I've seen this from the inside because I served at the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration. And I want to tell you, the lawyers are the ones you really got to be scared of. The internal lawyers, because they will do anything to keep people from putting a department or agency at risk. And I just think it showed an incredible lack of leadership on her part that she could not stand up to the lawyers and just tell the truth, or even some modicum of the truth, some small slice of the truth. Any part of it would have been better than what she did. And I think people really were so frustrated. I know that the leadership was, but I think even all of us as Americans, every single person I've talked to who caught any part of that hearing was so frustrated at the fact that she would not answer a single question, even things that she has said in the media or elsewhere, she would not say in the hearing. And I miss the days when you had leaders who would resign just to be honorable, to do the honorable thing, right? And I think she should have stood up. She should have said something. She should have admitted some of the things that went wrong and offered her resignation. And instead, I think she held on as tenaciously as she could, towing the line, trying to be super cautious. And in the end, she's been pushed out. And I think with no dignity whatsoever. So good on her that she did this to herself.
I thought it was an amusing moment during the hearing when Representative Pat Fallon from Texas said, you need to stop guarding people and go back to guarding Doritos, because she used to work for Pepsi. Of course, they have Doritos under their umbrella. And this is my issue, is that things happen, tragedies happen, mistakes happen. We are human. Even the Secret Service is human. But when you have a tragedy, great leaders can be kind of bred from that tragedy. And she could have come out. She had an opportunity to come out, get in front of this, be speaking to the American people every day. This was an assassination attempt on a former president that left someone dead. And we've had one update, and you've got senators, the images of senators chasing her around the RNC to try to get answers. That is not a good look. And so for me, the resignation came not because of the failures of the Secret Service, but because of how awful she absolutely was. and disrespectful to the people who pay her salary. And I'm talking about the taxpayers. And by the way, every single person of note, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Jill and Joe Biden should have been standing with President Trump saying, you guys are in charge of protecting our families too. We need more. Like, give us some answers here. And I feel like we get a failure of leadership, but there was a bit of bipartisan support in this. I'm glad she's gone, but I don't think that lets the folks of the Secret Service off the hook. I still think we're owed an explanation as to how so much of those grounds in Butler went unsecured. What really happened? I mean, there are reports all over the place about people being on water towers, about where the shooters came from, who actually shot the suspect. And now reports are coming out. They're tracking the Heritage Foundation. I don't know if you heard about this.
What? The
Heritage Foundation came out and used his cell phone data to actually track his moments before, in the days running up to the shooting. The Heritage Foundation, of all places. And do you know that they had him going into a building that has an occupied office by the FBI? So this is how conspiracy theories are absolutely born, right? When we talk about the people who are not helpful to the movement, who operate in conspiracies, they're doing it because we're having to put together piecemeal investigations because we're actually not hearing from the Secret Service or the FBI, who is in charge of the oversight for this particular event. And it's just disgusting.
And because I know you make such a good point. I mean, you and I talk a lot about the fact that conspiracy theories are so destructive, but it is hard to fault people in a way now because we've been lied to so many times. And you know what drives me crazy? And I think you got at this in something that you said. And I think this is a bigger problem in our culture right now is the lack of honor, the fact that people don't take responsibility for their mistakes.
Yeah.
And you have people just covering their butts all the time and trying to play safe. And, you know, how many times have we seen, just like in the last 8 to 10 years, all the different things have happened where they put out one story and then it turns out to be something else, but nobody ever apologizes. Nobody ever said we were wrong or anything. And I think that is a big cultural problem today.
It really is. Nobody wants to admit when we get something wrong. And you know what? I think we'd all be a whole lot more understanding about it. We all get it. We all get stuff wrong.
I know.
And I sure would rather deal with something and move past it and figure out how to learn from things that are tragic than have people just cover it up and make you feel like you're insane for asking questions. I mean, that's literally what I feel like the theme of the last 4 years have been. And that is gaslighting you into thinking that you're the crazy person when it's actually these government agencies that are hiding everything from the people. And that kind of brings us into where we are right now with Joe Biden. Katie, you know, my mom is a Democrat. I love her to pieces. But I have to tell you, if I were a Democrat today, I would be disgusted at what has transpired. I mean, think about this. For 4 years, the Democrat Party, including Kamala Harris, who is right there for it, including Karine Jean-Pierre, they lied and covered for a man who is not capable of running for re-election. When we called it out in conservative podcasts or on conservative radio, we were called conspiracy theorists. In fact, just a month ago, when we commented on Obama having to walk Joe Biden off the stage at a Hollywood fundraiser, we were told that they just love each other, and that was a cheap fake video. This has been going on for 4 years. They've been covering for this guy, and they thought they could pull the wool over our eyes again until that debate. And now, if you want to put salt in the wounds of Democrat voters, instead of giving people a chance to figure out who they might want to represent them in 2024, there has been a literal coronation of Kamala Harris in a 24-hour period. And it's really hard to believe that they didn't have this plan all worked out already. Kamala Harris, from the party that wants to defend democracy all the time and says that it's Republicans who are threats to the democracy and Trump's a threat to democracy, they're not being good stewards of democracy. Kamala Harris is going to become the Democratic nominee, the Democrat nominee for president in 2024 without receiving one stinking vote. And if I'm a Democrat today, I'm insulted because they played you for a fool. And the party thinks that they know better than you do, and they know better, and that winning is more important than anything else. I'm so turned off by watching what has transpired in the Democrat Party. I truly question how people can still send their money, but they are $100 million in a 24-hour period, allegedly, to support Kamala Harris.
Not sure I believe that, but anyway, we'll take it for what it is. But so
I would say allegedly.
Yeah, right. So I think here are two really big questions. So my first thought when I heard that Joe Biden had stepped down was, okay, if he is not mentally fit to run for office a second time, which is the sort of the implicit understanding here, right? Then how can he be in good enough position to run the country as president? And it will be really interesting to see if he says anything like that tonight. Is he stepping down from the presidency tonight? I think, honestly, I think if the movers and connivers of the Democrat Party have anything to say about it, I think they will do everything they can to get Kamala into position as president before the election, because they know that gives her a big boost in the voting booth. What do you think?
Yeah, I have to tell you that I agree with you about Joe Biden, but there's so many things I think where your heart kind of splits away from politics. And politically, I think it is better for the Republican Party. It is better for President Trump to have Joe Biden in the White House and finish out his term. Look, he hasn't been running the country anyway. Those big decisions, if we get attacked, I mean, these are not, I don't believe, and I don't think that he's been in charge for many, I don't know if he's ever been really in charge. So it doesn't necessarily bother me, because I think the same people will be running things, whether it's Kamala Harris sitting behind the Oval Office desk or whether it is Joe Biden. But politically, I'm riding with Biden. I hope that he finishes out his term, because if you make Kamala Harris the incumbent, she is going to become the first female president of the United States, which makes me incredibly sad, because as a little girl growing up here, I really always wanted to be proud of the first female president. And I don't know that I'm going to be proud if it's Kamala Harris. But that being said, if I think it also gives her that leg up to run as an incumbent. And I do think she's a terrible candidate. I'm going to tell you some things that you need to know about Kamala Harris, because I've watched her in California over really the last 20 years, trying to make a name for herself. And there's stuff that the people should know about. But I think that there is a grace period given to brand new candidates. I mean, it was given even to President Trump, and people hated him. Joe Biden got a grace period. It was Afghanistan that started to turn his numbers. So I don't know if we want to give her that and make it that much harder to try to kick out the first female president if she is given the title of president before November. So I am very hopeful that Joe sticks it out. But at this point, I don't know. I mean, we heard from him 24 hours ago saying he intends to campaign with Kamala and he's going to be out there. But, you know, things change, and it shows you just what kind of creatures are running the Democrat Party. I think Nancy Pelosi sharpened her claws. The reports are out saying she was going to let Joe do it the easy way for the first 2 weeks. And when he started to refuse to get out of the race, she was going to do it the hard way. And I think she literally threatened him out of office. And it's not a great way for power to be passed around in this country.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen now?
You know what? I broke my crystal ball. It was smoking. So I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful. Again, best case scenario for me at this point is that Joe stays in office. I think Kamala has to run. I think the American people are going to have to see her, and I don't think she's going to be all that impressive on the main stage. I think you have Democrats who are happy they have someone running with a normalized pulse. So I think you're going to see people in California and New York who will coalesce behind Kamala. But the truth is that this election is going to be determined by independent voters in the swing states. And does she play well there? And I also wonder how she's going to do with minority voters. You know, all of the polling that has come out since we've heard that Kamala's a possibility, every single poll, Trump in a head-to-head matchup beats her. But even with minority voters, and this was really interesting, this is part of the Harris X, the Forbes poll, she's tied with Trump when it comes to Latino voters. That's huge. It's huge.
I think that's because I personally, I think it's because they haven't dug enough into her background. I mean, I think she has a terrible record. I think her whole career trajectory has been sort of one anointing after another, right?
Because she can't win the old fashioned way.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I think if you ask me, this is sort of the old political machinery at work, and who cares what the voters want, right? But I think think it's her record itself that is really so weak. She really hasn't done anything.
Okay, so you want to talk about it because I think this is super interesting. So one of the things I've always said and warned about Kamala, unfortunately for Democrats, this is what they look for in their party now, and that is they are looking for transactional actors. This is why Bernie Sanders did not play, because he was too ideological. They want someone, and I'm talking about the Democrat Party apparatus, wants someone who is a figurehead who they can control. That was Joe Biden, who was never probably fully functional in the White House. That is the story of Kamala. And I believe the DNC wanted Kamala to be the nominee in 2020. I think they pushed everything at her, but she was so unlikable that she sank. And so that's why they had to give it to Joe. And then the pressure was on for him to choose Kamala because of the party. That wasn't a Joe Biden decision. Kamala had called Joe Biden a racist on the debate stage. So this was all put together. So the party really gets their wish that they put Kamala into place, literally coronating her without even one person voting for her. So here's what I've learned about Kamala in California. So obviously, and I'm so interested to know what you think about this on our Happy Women podcast. One of the things I want to warn against is the first thing people are going to say about Kamala Harris is somehow she slept her way to the top, or that she got, unfair advantages because of who she dated. She did date Willie Brown. It's unclear. They were in a relationship. It shouldn't have happened. She was 30 years younger than Willie Brown. He was the mayor of San Francisco, carried a lot of clout. I'm sure she was with him for a reason. But as a party, I don't think that is the most effective thing that we can use against Kamala Harris, because as you said, her record, it stinks. And I would feel so much better about us if we actually go after her for substantive issues as opposed to her private life, because I think it just puts a bad name on Republicans. You agree with me on that one?
I do. I think it's a great point. And I feel like it's a point that is made with regard to women and not to men. I feel that women are held to a different standard. And honestly, in the case of her and Willie Brown, obviously she was a 29-year-old woman. She had full responsibility for herself, but I have to say, I hold him more responsible. He was the one in the bigger position of power. I think it was an abuse of power on his part. But yes, I agree with you. Let's judge her on her record, on her professional record. Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you what, if it were a man, and this is true, they say, and someone 30 years younger, he married well. Is what they would say.
Exactly.
Right, so
trophy wife. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's talk about the real Kamala stuff. So she comes out and she tells people that she is for criminal justice reform, right? Black Lives Matter. She was all for that. She was using her money to get people out of jail during the Black Lives Matter riots. A lot of people have talked about this, but it's worth underscoring that as Attorney General, she got criticism for being soft on crime. So what did she do? She went after the easiest low-level drug offenses that she could find. She had in a year period, she had 1,500 convictions against Black men for low-level marijuana possession charges. And when Tulsi Gabbard called her out about that on the debate stage in 2020, she chuckled about using pot herself while she threw into jail 1,500 Black men who she claims to be an advocate for today. That's number one. Of course, the very public failure about the border czar. She was the border czar who did nothing. There was no management. She went to the border one time and didn't actually even go to one of the hot spots. So a complete failure there. And what did she do? She chuckles about it. The administration gaslights us, telling us that the border is safe. And of course, you have to note that the policies of Biden are the policies of Kamala Harris. It's been reported that her staff during the Biden administration, she's had a 92% turnover rate in people that have worked for her. It is incredibly high.
The ghost of Sheila Jackson Lee.
Exactly right. Now, it also is worth noting some of the stuff you may not have heard. So before she was Attorney General in California, before she was Senator, before she was Vice President, she was a San Francisco prosecutor and she was a DA in San Francisco. She was in that position for 6 years. During that time, she started making convictions, obviously, in her office. She was trying to look tough on crime. There was a lab tech that for years, apparently, and this was a female lab tech, was stealing drugs, she was warned many times. In fact, they have messages published in the Washington Post where undependable was written all in caps about this lab tech. But she told no one about this. So after 6 years, she had no policy or guidelines for ensuring that defendants in San Francisco knew that they had tainted evidence probably used against them against an unreliable lab tech. And do you know, eventually, when she was running for Senate, and this came back to haunt her because the story came out, 1,500 cases were dismissed in San Francisco because of faulty evidence under her rule over 6 years' time. 1,500.
Wow. That's incredible.
Huge failure.
Yeah.
She's also involved, and again, these things you can agree with her, not agree with her. Maybe we think she's tougher on crime than she pretends to be, but it just shows you that she will tell people whatever it takes to get the job that she wants. She's also a member of the Hillcrest Country Club. She and her husband, Doug, belong to that club, which has been called racist and an aristocracy, and is now involved in a huge lawsuit that's costing LA County a lot of money. Back when she was running for vice president, she criticized Alex Acosta, who was in the Trump administration, for being too soft on Jeffrey Epstein. We all remember that. But when Kamala Harris was the attorney general of California, there was a mayor by the name of Bob Filner in San Diego, Katie, who they used to call him all sorts of names. We're ladies here. I won't tell you what they called him, but he was accused by 20 women.
Wow.
Battery, of sexual assault. He trapped a woman in a Marie Callender's booth, wouldn't let her out, and also was accused of putting women in headlocks so that they could not leave his office because he was very handsy and he was doing all of these crazy things. It happens just as the Me Too movement starts out. Kamala Harris allowed him to take a plea deal for false imprisonment and battery of only 3 victims. He was supposed to get, just for that case, 5 years in prison. Instead, because she made him a deal because of the political power and the people he surrounded himself with, 3 months of house arrest. Yet she has the nerve to criticize anybody else and says that she's out there protecting women. It's a lie. The Catholic Church is another great example of this. You and I are both Catholics, but we know that during the Catholic Church history not so long ago, there were a lot of people who came out and said that they had been abused or molested by priests. As DA in San Francisco, they were supposed to be working with survivors of sexual abuse, but there was a change. There was an overturning of a law that put a statute of limitations back on child crimes. And so many of the families and the survivors had to go to civil court rather than criminal court against the Catholic Church. As soon as this happened, her office shut down all access to the investigative files, took no requests from the victims to help them with their civil suits against the Catholic Church. And she's been really insulted by activists and survivors of sexual abuse cases, particularly when it comes to Catholic priests, because she shut them down. Why did she do that? Because the Catholic Church has huge political sway in the city of San Francisco, and she didn't want to be on the wrong side of that. So the reason I tell you these things, and the reason we talk about them, is because there is a lot about Kamala Harris that needs to be looked at. She says she is for the kids. She says she is for the women. She says she is about criminal justice reform, but her history tells a totally different story.
You know, all I can think of is some of the different speakers during the Republican National Convention who got up and told exceptional stories about what Donald Trump was like as an employer, as a friend over many, many years. And it's really important what you can learn about a candidate's past and the kind of character that they are and the kind of person that they are. So I just, I'm fully with you. I hope that we don't get sidetracked by stories of her, relationships and that kind of thing. I don't think it's what's most relevant. I don't think it's what's most damning. But I do really hope that this record gets brought into the public and that people take a hard look at this before they decide who to vote for.
And keep an eye on the election cycle. I'm still super interested in seeing what Black men do, because she does not play well with Black men. I think women will be excited to vote for a female candidate, but I'll be really interested to see if that is a shift. We'll see. I know that 59% of Californians a couple of months ago said they didn't want to see her at the top of the ticket, and that's her home state.
Wow.
All right, let's talk about Elon Musk. Finally, there's just so much to talk about. Elon Musk says that his kid, his son, who was born a boy, became the victim of the evil woke virus, and has now done puberty blockers and is now identifying as a woman. And actually, we have a little bit of the clip. He did a podcast with Jordan Peterson. Misty, if you want to play that for us.
I lost my son, essentially. So, they call it dead naming for a reason.
Yeah,
all right. So the reason it's called dead naming is because your son is dead. So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and there's lots of people in that situation now.
Right.
It's not pretty, and lots of demolished kids.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good reason to be the final straw. All right, so let's.
So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that, and we're making some progress.
That's pretty incredible. Yeah. What do you think?
So I told you I was ironing yesterday, and I was looking for something to listen to. I did not know that interview was happening, and I stumbled on it. And I like them both. I mean, I told you I recently went to see Jordan Peterson live. Loved it. I thought it was a great talk that he did from his forthcoming book, which I think is going to be called "We Who Struggle with God." Very interesting, storytelling and sort of exploration. But I come across this interview between the two of them, and I have to tell you, the beginning, listening to about the first half an hour, was like listening to two musicians in a room playing two completely different pieces of music. I mean, here you have two giant brains, like just firing rockets, in all different directions. But this theme of the woke culture and his war on the woke mind virus was that was in there from the beginning. I didn't know that that's where it was going. I didn't know that he'd had this experience with his son. And the way it came up in the beginning was because Jordan Peterson and Elon started talking about AI. So Elon is very, very engaged. He's actually building his own whole new AI system called XAI, and he calls it Grok. And they were talking about this, and Elon was saying one of the reasons that he decided to get involved in this was because he felt that many of the other people who were building AI systems were dishonest and were caught up, had bought into the woke culture, had been, stricken with the woke mind virus. And he knew that AI was going to be developed regardless. And it was really important that somebody with somewhat better intentions or whatever, more integrity, also engage in it. And, he's coming up from behind. He started later than the others, but it's, as with all things Elon, it sounds like he's going to quickly outstrip them. But I found it so moving that it comes down in many ways to this very, very personal story. He was lied to, as many parents have been lied to by this. It is now a proven falsehood that children run a greater risk of committing suicide if they are not granted these, puberty blockers and quote, gender therapy. And I, such sadness in him and on his face.
You can tell, you can see it there.
Oh, that was crushing. And I have to say, Jordan Peterson, for being a psychiatrist, I thought was kind of remarkably, what's the word? Sort of insensitive, or like.
I thought so too. He was like, right? Yeah, we've all been through that.
Yeah. Or that's a good reason to go to war with the woke mind virus. No, like let the man talk. But anyway, aside from that, to me, this is very much like the moments that you had back under communism, right? I think what happened under communism is very similar to what happens under DEI. A lot of otherwise smart people really thought that communism would bring about a kinder, gentler world, as do people today think about DEI. And what it took for people to start waking up from that was to hear the stories of the people coming home from the gulags, having been tortured and imprisoned, and for seeing people from within the movement itself, some of the strongest believers of communism, being executed, right? And to me, this is exactly the same, because this is what these totalitarian regimes do. They eat themselves, they destroy people, they cause so much destruction and suffering. And it's only when people see that they wake up to it and they start to fight back against it. And this is a perfect example of that. You see where DEI inevitably leads, and it is destruction of our children.
I know.
And so I am super, super grateful. I am so sorry that Elon's son is put on the front line of this culture war. But I am so grateful that we have someone like Elon who has such a powerful voice speaking out about it. And I will just say to you, that video, that clip that we just watched, his interview with Jordan Peterson, I imagine that the clip itself is seen by many more people, but the entire interview has had 27 million views. That is huge.
We need voices like him to help normalize these discussions. And I'm so grateful that he's part of that movement now. And I will just tell you, and we can conclude with this, he's not messing around when he says he wants to take on that woke virus, because he has, as soon as Gavin Newsom signed a bill just a couple of weeks ago to protect kids, or I don't even know protect kids is the right word, I guess protect teachers from having to notify parents about gender changes or name changes in schools in California. Gavin Newsom says now schools don't have to notify parents of any of that. And Elon Musk was so upset on X, he said that he was moving out of California as a response to that one single signature from Gavin Newsom. And so, unfortunately, to leave a bruise and to make a mark, sometimes you have to make it about money, and maybe it sends a message. But I am happy he's a warrior on our side for sure.
Yeah, amen.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. And a couple of reminders. If you could, please rate our podcast. We love 5-star reviews. Share it with your friends. Of course, you want to see video. You want to see where you can get the podcast in different places. Just go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Click on Happy Women. You'll find us there. And make sure you get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. You can also check out her website, katiegorka.org. And you can search her out on Facebook. Look for Catherine Gorka. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jennifer Horn Radio, and always on X and on Truth Social at Jennifer Horn. Thanks for joining us. This has been another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.